as Tracy said, I'm a doctor specialising in respiratory and sleep. And so the title for my talk is Why and How to Sleep Better. So why am I doing this talk? So I'm so grateful that my specialty is respiratory and sleep because, and I sort of didn't really recognise that at the time that I started to do it. I think when I started to do it, I liked it because of the respiratory side more so. But the more I've learnt about health, and when I was at uni, like I got taught about disease, not health. But the more I sort of learned about health, the more I realised that the importance of respiratory and sleep being so important for overall health. So my mission really, from a practice point of view, is to help as many people as possible to improve their overall health. And my specialist interest is in lung disease and sleep disorders. And health, I think, really sort of falls on these like 4 pillars of health that are often talked about, being exercise, sleep, nutrition, and mental health. And so respiratory really comes into the exercise part of it. And I also like the fact that breathing itself is becoming more and more recognised. And I like the fact that there are breathing workshops going on and that Avi is talking about breathing tomorrow as being really important. Sleep, which I'm going to talk about, nutrition, we'll hear a lot about, and mental health as well. And so I think that to achieve optimal health, we really need to concentrate on all of these 4 areas because you can't just have one of them or 2 of them without actually, to achieve optimal health, you really have to have all 4. And the other 2 that sometimes people add into this list, which I quite like, are social interaction with people and also connection to nature. But it hasn't always been the case because for a lot of time, people have thought of sleep as being a sign of weakness. And you will hear like somebody gets an email at like some ungodly hour at night and think, oh, gee, they must have been working hard. You know, they're up late working, and it's sort of a sign of like, of strength of not needing that much sleep. Like if you need too much sleep, like what a waste of time. And everybody's probably heard the saying, you know, you can sleep when you're dead. But when you're dead, you're actually not asleep. When you're asleep, your mind is actually really active. But if you don't get enough sleep, maybe you'll end up dying earlier, because we actually do know that a lack of sleep increases our mortality. And so that's pretty strong evidence to suggest that the importance of sleep. And we know this because every year across the world, in 1.6 billion people across 70 countries, is conducted an experiment twice a year, which is daylight saving. And in springtime, when we lose an hour's sleep, there's a consistent 24% increase in the rate of heart attacks, which is reversed when we go out of daylight saving and we gain an extra hour. And we see the same with an increase in road accidents, we see an increase in poor mood, and we see an increase in suicide every year when we go into daylight saving. A lack of sleep also has a very strong effect on our immune system, and that's probably one of the main reasons why a lack of sleep increases our risk of breast, bowel, and prostate cancer. And they're the cancers that we have evidence for, but I suspect that it's probably the case in other cancers as well. And everybody's concerned about getting dementia as they get older, and a lack of sleep increases our risk of Alzheimer's disease. So I love this quote from Matthew Walker. I'm not sure if anybody's read his book, Why We Sleep. It's really excellent. But he says, sleep is not a luxury, it's a biological necessity. Sleep deprivation is also associated with weight gain. And so if you want to lose weight, you should try and sleep more. And there are 2 hormones, which I'm sure we'll hear more about through some of the talks this weekend. Leptin, the legend, which is appetite suppression hormone, so helps suppress our appetite. But ghrelin, or the gremlin, is an appetite stimulating hormone. And a lack of sleep increases our ghrelin and reduces our leptin. So sleep deprivation causes weight gain. And sleep deprivation also changes our food preference. And so we know through experiments when people are sleep deprived, they're more likely to go towards foods that are high in sugar and more processed carbohydrate-rich foods. When people have good quality sleep, they're more likely to choose better quality foods. And it sort of makes sense because if you're feeling tired and lethargic, like sugar and sweet things and carbohydrates give you that boost. And so people, or caffeine or sugary drinks, people were more likely to go for. So I think we have to eat well to sleep well, but we also need to sleep well to eat well. So if that's the case, well, what is normal sleep? We can talk about the quantity of sleep. So are people getting enough sleep? And what quantity of sleep is it that we actually need? And it's probably the quantity of sleep that a person needs is really the amount of sleep that you need to get through the daytime without sleepiness. And it's individual, but it probably lies between a 7 and 9 hour period of time. So if people are saying that, I only need 5 hours sleep and I'm completely fine, then it's probably not true. And getting away with like 5 hours of sleep during the weekend and then sleeping in throughout the weekend to catch up probably means that you're sleep deprived during the week. We can talk about quality of sleep, and we talk about quality of sleep with regards to sleep architecture. And so that's how is our sleep made up of, in different stages of sleep, with non-REM sleep, REM sleep, and are we having frequent arousals through sleep? And arousal from sleep means sort of a brief awakening through sleep. We should have a short sleep latency, which means that when we go to bed, we should fall asleep within 15 to 20 minutes. We should be able to maintain sleep throughout the night. So it's normal to have a few awakenings throughout the night, but we shouldn't have long periods of wakefulness after sleep onset. Our breathing should remain stable, so we shouldn't snore or stop breathing while we're asleep. And we should wake up feeling refreshed and alert. So when people first wake up, there's always that sort of sleep inertia. So you might feel a little bit groggy for a little while, but after 10, 15 minutes, once you get up, you should feel refreshed and alert, and you should not be sleepy during the day. So who has normal sleep? Who goes to bed every night at the same time, falls asleep within 15 minutes, sleeps for 7 to 9 hours, wakes up without an alarm, feeling refreshed, and is not sleepy during the day? So for everybody else, how to achieve normal sleep. And so when I see people in clinic with problems with their sleep, I think about it in 4 different sections. And I think that it sort of conceptualizes it for me and helps me sort of try and work out what the problem is with someone's sleep is. And I go through this in order. And there's a reason for the order. The first one is to ensure that the sleep quality is good. Sleep quality is not good, then it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to get the benefit of the sleep. You need to make sure that your body clock is aligned. And your body clock, we talk about circadian rhythm. We need to optimize mental health because obviously mental health plays a big role in sleep, and it's sort of a double-edged thing where poor mental health and mental health issues will cause poor sleep, but then also the poor sleep affects your mood. And everyone knows that if you don't sleep well, it affects your mood. And we need to cultivate good sleeping habits. And so I'm going to talk mostly about 1, 2, and 4, but do stress that doesn't mean that mental health is not important. And so they all, once again, these things all play together to achieve optimal health and to achieve optimal sleep. And we can't have just a couple of these, 1 or 2 of these things working. We need to have all 4 of them working to optimize sleep. So sleep quality is the first consideration because if the quality of sleep's suboptimal, then it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to get the benefit from it. And the main thing that affects quality of sleep, or the most common thing that affects quality of sleep, is sleep apnea. And so what happens with sleep apnea is there's repetitive episodes of obstruction to airflow at the area of the upper airway that causes waking from sleep. So what happens is that our upper airway around here is held open by muscle. And so while everybody's awake, everyone's awake, our airway is held open, and so by muscle, and so we breathe in and out through an open airway. When we go to sleep, our muscles relax and our airway relaxes as well. And if the airway relaxes enough to become floppy, it vibrates during sleep. And that vibration of the upper airway during breathing while we're asleep is what causes the sound of snoring. If the airway is vibrating away, but then collapses enough to slow the breathing down, or actually sometimes stops the breathing by closing completely, then our brain will thankfully recognise that the breathing has stopped and the airway is closed, and will wake us up so that we then open up our airway and start breathing again and fall back to sleep. Usually people, when this happens, they'll wake up just for a brief moment, fall straight back to sleep and won't remember that actually happening. And if that happens occasionally throughout the night, it's not such a problem. But if that's happening a lot through the night, then it causes fragmentation of sleep because of multiple brief awakenings. And that's what sleep apnea is, and that's the reason why it causes sleepiness, because of the frequent brief awakening from sleep. And so we work out if somebody's got sleep apnea by doing a sleep study, and a sleep study involves sleeping overnight while being monitored. So we monitor the brain waves, the EEG, to know if someone's asleep, awake, or in what stage of sleep they're in. We monitor their oxygen levels, their breathing, heart rate, and things, and we get output like this across a timeline so this is from 9 o'clock through till 9 in the morning. This is what's called a hypnogram, and when there's no colour, this person's awake, so they're awake to begin with. Yellow is light sleep, so there's just a little tiny bit of light sleep, which is just as you're falling off to sleep. The green is non-REM stage 2 sleep. The blue is stage 3 or deep sleep, which tends to occur more so in the first half of the night. And then at the top there is the red is REM sleep, and REM sleep is when we tend to have dreams and muscles are completely relaxed. And so we tend to go through, 1, 2, 3 REM, 1, 2, 3 REM, 1, 2, 3 REM, 1, 2, 3 REM, as we cycle through the night. So this is very normal. This is brief arousal, so it's normal to have some arousal throughout the night or brief awakenings. This is the position that they're sleeping in, because snoring and sleep apnea is often worse when you're on your back, because when you're on your back, tongue and jaw fall back and obstruct the airway more easily. Oxygen levels are nice, normal, around 95 to 100%. And these marks along here are times when the breathing slowed down just a little bit, but not enough to stop. And so this is all very normal. This puts it into numbers, and we get a total AHI, which means apnea-hypopnea index, which means how many times does the breathing slow down or stop per hour, and this person was 1.7, so less than 5 is normal. This is someone with very severe sleep apnea. The first thing you see is that there's way too much yellow. So all of this yellow transitional sleep is just as people drifting off to sleep. And there's so much yellow because they're waking up all the time. So they wake up, go back to sleep, wake up, go back to sleep, wake up, go back to sleep. Consistent arousals throughout the night. Oxygen levels dropping consistently throughout the night because OBA is obstructive apnea, and just consistently the airway is obstructing, waking up, open the airway, breathe, fall back to sleep, obstruct consistently, and AHI 94. So this is extremely severe sleep apnea. So sleep apnea is the most common thing that affects our quality of sleep, but there are lots of things that can affect our quality of sleep. Restless leg syndrome. Sometimes people get restless legs in the evening, and it can cause them to wake up throughout the night. Sometimes grinding of the teeth can actually cause people to wake throughout the night. Pain, getting up to go to the toilet, medical illness, medications, and other things. So we can snore without sleep apnea though, so there can be the vibration of the upper airway causing snoring without it affecting the quality of sleep. If there is snoring without sleep apnea, there are certain things that can make snoring worse, and certainly alcohol makes snoring worse. Sleeping on your side can improve it. As I said, it can be positional. So maybe if this guy was just to roll over, maybe he might stop snoring. Clearing the nose. So if you've got a blocked nose, you're more likely to snore because breathing through the mouth increases snoring and increases sleep apnea. So sometimes just as simple as clearing the nose. And I recommend to everyone, like this Fess nasal spray, which is just a saline solution just before sleep, is really quite effective at clearing the nose before sleep. And also keeping your mouth shut. So breathing through your nose improves quality of sleep. And so you can tape your mouth shut. And I used to think this was a bit crazy, but the more I talk to people about this, the more I realise that actually heaps of people tape their mouth shut. I'm sure that someone in here will tape their mouth shut. So you can get these special tapes to tape your mouth shut. They cost about $1.20 or $1.30 or something, which if you're using that every night, that's quite expensive. So I use Micropore, which costs about $1.20 and lasts about 6 months. And so we do a lot of sleep studies. This is me just at the front of our practice where we set up patients for home-based sleep studies, and this is when I was set up for mine. Important to make sure that you've got colourful socks. So the next section is disorders of body clock. And this is quite interesting. I think that this is probably not as well recognised as it should be as a problem with sleep. And so our circadian rhythm modulates lots of different things, physiological functions, throughout a 24-hour period. And it has a very strong effect on our sleep and wakefulness. And there are lots of hormones and different things that change, including our body temperature throughout a 24-hour period that determines our circadian rhythm. But melatonin, from a sleep point of view, is just one of them, but it's one of the more important ones. And so melatonin begins to rise in response to darkness in the evening and helps our body prepare itself for sleep. And then about 2 hours before our natural wake-up time, the melatonin starts to reduce, and then when we get up, light is what turns off melatonin. So light in our eye turns off melatonin. And there's an important point 2 hours before our natural wake-up time, which is when our body hits its lowest temperature. And so sometimes you might recognise that because you wake up and you feel a little bit cold. But in the last 2 hours of sleep, our body is going through a whole lot of changes that are preparing ourselves for wakefulness. And so light is the most potent stimulus of our circadian rhythm. So light in our eyes turns off melatonin. And so this is clearly not good for us to sleep. And so this never used to exist, 10 years ago, but certainly causing more problems these days with people's sleep. And I'm sure that I'm guilty myself, that people wake up throughout the night and are staring at their phone. So there are lots of different things that affect our body clock and cause problems with our sleep with related to body clock. So shift work. So shift work's not good for us because it causes a problem with our body clock. Jet lag's not good for us because it causes a problem with our body clock. One of the more common ones is called delayed phase circadian rhythm disorder. And so what happens with this is that our natural time that we want to go to bed and the time that we want to wake up shifts forwards. And so we naturally want to fall asleep a little bit later and then sleep in a little bit longer. And so instead of, say, normally falling to sleep at, say, 10 o'clock and getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, our body might not want to fall asleep till midnight, 2 o'clock or later, but then want to sleep in. Does anyone have that happen to them? Does anyone have a teenager who has that happen to them? So it's actually normal in teenagers. So, and there's an argument that in the teenage years that school should start a bit later and go a little bit later to actually accommodate that normal shift in their body clock. But so what is the problem? So people present with two problems. One is that with insomnia, so they can't get to sleep. They say, I can't get to sleep. And because they go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, but their body clock is not ready for them to go to sleep till 2 in the morning, they're not going to sleep. They just lie there awake. The other problem it causes is sleepiness during the day. And so if body clock wants me to wake up at midday and then suddenly I need to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, then it causes significant sleepiness, both through sleep deprivation, not getting enough sleep, but also because when we sleep outside of when our body clock wants us to, or when we wake up outside of when our body clock wants us to, it causes us to feel sleepy. And so we can get a bit of an idea of what our body clock is. So if you've got a Garmin or a Fitbit or something, you can have a look at it and see get a bit of a pattern for when you're sleeping, or sometimes you can just keep a sleep diary and just take note of when you're sort of naturally falling asleep and what time are you naturally waking up. And so what can we do about that? And so there are two options. you can either adopt your life to fit in with when you're sleeping, or if you can't do that, then more often what we have to do is trying to change our sleeping patterns to fit in with our life. The common problem that often we find is that when people are at school, they maintain their body clock because they have to get up for school. And if you go from school to doing nothing for a period of time, then the night person, the night owl, will naturally go to sleep a bit later, get up a little bit later, go to sleep a bit later, get up a bit later, and then suddenly their body clock shifted right forwards, and then they get a job. It's like, oh shit, have to wake up really early now, and there's a real problem because body clock doesn't want me to do that. And so what does mum and dad do? Go to bed earlier. Makes sense, doesn't it? We'll just go to bed earlier. Like, if you can't get up in the morning, go to bed earlier. It's actually the wrong thing to do because it doesn't work. Because if you go to bed earlier, you're just not going to sleep because body clock's not ready. And so what we need to do is we need to manipulate the body clock to gradually shift it. And so whenever we want to change anything to do with sleep, we want to do it gradually. And so what we do is we work out what the natural wake-up time is. So say it's midday, and then we say, okay, we'll set an alarm for midday, and then every 2 or 3 days we're going to set the alarm half an hour earlier. Half an hour earlier, half an hour earlier. And we're going to set our bedtime at, say, 8 hours before our wake time. So waking up at midday, bedtime's at 2 a.m. So you wind down at 1:30, go to sleep at 2 o'clock, get up at 12 o'clock. And then you bring it half an hour earlier, 11:30, 1:30, 11 o'clock, half an hour earlier, and you keep stepping together to gradually bring it back. But then when you wake up, you need to expose your eyes to light, because light is what's turning off the melatonin. And so it's waking up at 12 o'clock and 40 to 60 minutes of light. So you can either go outside, so the best thing to do is go outside and exercise, because then you get the exercise and the light. But sometimes that's not practical, because if you're getting up at midday, you might not have time to go out and then spend the next hour sitting in the sun. So you can get light glasses. And so this person's got their light glasses, so you can get ready for work and do what you need to do while you're getting that exposure to light. And so when the light then moves half an hour earlier every few days, the melatonin's getting turned off a little bit earlier, and then you start to fall asleep a little bit earlier. You can take melatonin to help with this process, and a lot of people take melatonin for sleep, and you can now get it over the counter and everyone goes, oh, I'll just take melatonin. But most people take melatonin incorrectly. They just think, oh, I'll just take melatonin and then that'll just help me sleep. And it sort of does a little bit, but it doesn't really work. And the reason it doesn't work is because you need to take melatonin at the right time, because it's the timing of melatonin that makes a difference to people's sleep, not so much just the melatonin itself. And so what you do, your melatonin starts to be secreted about 2 hours before we sleep. So then when you're setting your time to go to bed at 2 a.m, you take your melatonin at midnight, wind down at 1:30, sleep at 2 a.m. Then when you bring it back earlier half an hour, the light gets half an hour, the bedtime gets half an hour earlier, the melatonin gets half an hour earlier. So then you're taking your melatonin at 11:30. And so basically the melatonin is pulling your bedtime a bit earlier, but what's much more stronger than the melatonin is the pushing, which is the light. So the light is pushing your bedtime, your circadian rhythm earlier, and the melatonin is pulling it a little bit. But you know, everybody likes a tablet. A tablet's just so much easier. And so that's why most people just go for the melatonin, but it's not as effective as the light. The next one is disorders of sleeping habits, which we call sleep hygiene. And there's a vicious cycle of insomnia. And what happens is that initially we have poor sleep, which might be due to stress or pain or some bad experience that then causes us to sleep poorly. And then we start to have negative thoughts about sleep and worry about sleep and not worry about not sleeping very well, causes anxiety about not sleeping well. And then, which is what's really common, is people try and do the right thing to make themselves feel better, but actually make the problem worse. And so by taking daytime naps, think, oh, I didn't sleep very well last night, I'll have a nap. And then you get into the habit of having a nap, and then that makes you sleep not so well at night time. Or they spend too long in bed, so they think, okay, I've woken up and I haven't slept very well, so I'm just going to stay in bed a bit longer, or I might go to bed a bit earlier. And what you see is sometimes people are spending way too long in bed, so they might be going to bed at like 8 o'clock in the evening, and they're staying in bed till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and they're spending 12 or 13 hours in bed because they're worried that they're not going to feel very well because they haven't slept very well. But then if you're spending 12 hours in bed and you only need 8 hours sleep, there's 4 hours awake. And if that 4 hours occurs between 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, then causes worry and anxiety about not sleeping well. So sometimes what we need to do is actually restrict the time available for sleep by going to bed a little bit later and getting up a little bit earlier. People develop, then start taking sleeping tablets to try and help it. And when people take sleeping tablets, I think they usually take them incorrectly as well, which I'll talk about in a minute, and it also causes poor mental health, which leads to continued poor sleep, more negative thoughts about sleep, and we get into this vicious cycle of worry about sleep, and it just makes itself worse. And so what we want to do to try and break this is cultivate good sleeping habits. And the 6 good sleeping habits I think are most important, number one being the most important, is having a regular pattern. And so if you do one thing, just have a regular pattern. Just go to bed at the same time every night, get up at the same time every morning, and just keep that regular. And whatever happens in between, happens. Just let it happen. But the thing that you can control is the time you go to bed and the time you wake up. You can't actually really control whether you wake up at night time. People say, oh, wake up and, stuff on my mind. And there are things that you can do to try and reduce it, but you actually don't have control over whether you're going to wake up or not. Some people wake up and it becomes a bit of a habit, so it's probably going to continue. But what you do have control over, the time you go to bed and the time you wake up. So you just keep that consistent. If you sleep poorly, you get up at the same time. The next night, you go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. If you have a really bad night's sleep and you maintain the same pattern, instead of just saying, oh, I haven't slept very well, I'll stay in bed a bit longer, just do the same again the next night, because your body does have the ability to catch up. So if you do sleep poorly for a few nights, your body will, in subsequent nights, consolidate sleep better. It'll have a greater proportion of slow wave or deep sleep and a greater proportion of REM sleep to be able to catch up on poor sleep. So just keeping that regular pattern is really important. We want to have a bedtime routine which involves sort of winding down. We want to understand sleep state misperception. I'll talk about that in just a second. Mindfulness exercises are really useful, especially for the racing mind and to help with anxiety and the mental health side of things. And I really like some of these apps that you can get on your phone that I recommend to people. I think people find really useful. Light exposure I've spoken about in the morning, especially when it's difficult to get up in the morning. Having light exposure is important. And keeping active. And we want to avoid the bad sleeping habits, especially the iPhone or TV in bed. Poor diet, especially sugar. Too much time in bed, as I said, is actually not a good thing. Daytime naps can make it difficult to sleep at night time. Some people have a daytime nap and it's no problem. If you have a daytime nap and it's just a part of your life and you like having a nap and you don't have a problem with sleeping at night time, then there's no problem having a nap. I mean, our body has a natural dip in its circadian rhythm in the afternoon, which is why the Spanish and some other cultures have a siesta. And that's perfectly normal to do that. But if you can't sleep at night time, then that's when you probably want to try and cut down on daytime naps or eliminate them. Watching the clock is not a good idea because it contributes to the anxiety of not being able to sleep, and caffeine and alcohol. Sleep state misperception is really interesting. Everybody experiences this. Have you ever had a night where you've woken up, you've lied there for ages, can't sleep, you look at the clock and you're like, God, it's been 4 hours since I woke up, but time seems to have gone quicker than, say, if that 4 hours was spent on an aeroplane or in a bus. And the reason that happens is because you've probably fallen asleep and woken up and not realised. And so we can fall into a sleep and wake up and not actually perceive that we've fallen asleep and woken up. And during that time, we can actually even go into really good quality sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. We have people who have sleep studies who come in and go, well, that was a waste of time. I did not sleep. So didn't sleep. Or people say to me, I don't sleep. So don't sleep at all. No, some nights I just don't even sleep. And so, oh, really? So don't fall asleep at all? Just lie there all night and awake? Yep, awake. And so how do you feel the next day? And I just go, well, I'm okay. I said, did you fall asleep during the day the next day? and they don't fall asleep. So, well, how can that possibly happen? Well, the way it happens is that they didn't lie awake. They think they were awake all night, but they're actually falling asleep and waking up. And so when we have a look at the sleep statement, we say, hey, like the EEG, like shows that your brain was actually going into really good quality sleep. Sometimes they'll swear black and blue that they didn't sleep, but they did. And so if you feel that you're not sleeping very well at night time, it's useful to recognise that this happens, because sometimes just lying there and resting is really beneficial. And I think sometimes it takes away the anxiety of not sleeping as well, because people get really like annoyed and anxious and worried about not sleeping well and how they're going to feel the next day. And recognising that just lying there and resting, you may actually drift in and out of sleep more than you think you do, is actually really useful. And I think it's really common in people with insomnia. So sometimes people experience this quite a lot, and it causes them a lot of worry about their sleep, and that tends to be the people who have a lot of insomnia. And the other thing is that time of sleep goes quickly and time awake goes slow. And that's why, so if we spend 10 minutes during the night awake, that seems really long, and then we might drift into sleep and then for an hour, and that time goes really fast. So then we've got 10 minutes awake, 10 minutes awake, an hour asleep. You just perceive that time awake. Sleeping tablets, I don't think that there are many situations where sleeping tablets are the answer to improving sleep. I actually can't even remember times that I've prescribed sleeping tablets. I spend a lot of time helping people get off them. But one thing that I find is that when people take sleeping tablets, they usually take them the wrong way. And the common mistake that I see people do is that they go, okay, I'll go to bed, I'll see how I go, I've got a lot on tomorrow, so if I'm not sleeping well, I've got my sleeping tablet, I'm ready to go, and I'll take it. So they go to bed, they've set themselves up for failure, they've got their failure plan ready to go, and they fail. Of course they were going to fail, and so then they take their sleeping tablet, and then they feel crap because they're like, oh God, I've taken the sleeping tablet again, and I didn't really want to take it, but now I've taken it, but they go to sleep. Sleeping tablets put you to sleep quickly sometimes, but they actually don't make you feel better the next day. So I think the better way to do it, if you're going to take a sleeping tablet, or if you are in a situation where you take sleeping tablets and you want to try and get off them, or you want to use them properly, what I think you should do is you should set yourself up for success. And so instead of like going to bed and having it as a failure plan, say, okay, well, I'm going to go to bed at the same time every night. I'm going to get up at the same time every morning, no matter what. And if I go 3 nights in a row where I've slept really badly and I'm starting to feel not so good or tired during the day, then what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take sleeping tablets for 3 days in a row. And so then you make that decision when you wake up in the morning. And so you've made that decision. It gets to the evening, you're going to bed at the same time, half an hour before you go to bed, you take a sleeping tablet. You don't feel like you failed because that was your plan. You've planned to do it, you've done it, you sleep better, you do it for 3 days in a row, and then you just go back to normal. So you use it as a way to get back on track rather than to put yourself to sleep. Caffeine obviously can affect sleep. If people have problems with their sleep, it's a good idea to cut down or get rid of caffeine. Caffeine hangs around for a lot longer than sometimes we realise. And so if you have caffeine, 6 hours later, half of that caffeine is still there. And so it's not just coffee before bed that can affect your sleep. It might be coffee at lunchtime that can affect your sleep. Alcohol is excellent at putting us to sleep, but it actually affects our quality of sleep. And so it tends to cause us to go to sleep quicker, but then causes more sleep fragmentation, so it adversely affects quality of sleep. It reduces REM and usually results in feeling worse. So not a good idea. So in summary, I think these are the 4 things that we need to concentrate on to improving our sleep. And as a challenge, that I think that although the 3 people that said I think that they sleep perfectly, we can probably all pick a couple of things that maybe you could be doing better, and then if you concentrate on just 2 of them for a period of 2 weeks, you'll probably find that your sleep starts to improve. Does anybody have any that stand out to them that they think that they could do better?
Increase exercise.
Yep. Yep. So certainly, I mean, we can get to the end of the day and be mentally fatigued and then not be able to sleep very well. And certainly getting exercise during the day can help make us physically tired and will certainly improve sleep and improve our mental health too.
I like to go during the morning. I live in an apartment where there are no windows on both sides. And I realised as you were talking how little daylight actually comes into my home.
Yeah.
I walk outside.
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly light exposure in the morning is really good. And sometimes our houses are dark, especially this time of year where it's really dark outside anyway. It's hard to get that light exposure. So going outside is best because it's good to get up in the morning, and like Tracy was saying, like get up in the morning and get outside is a really good nice thing to do if you've got the time. Opening the blinds as much as possible is good. Just light from inside isn't powerful enough to have a strong influence on our circadian rhythm. So it's usually not adequate just to be inside with lights on. So that's why the light glasses are useful. And sometimes, you don't need to have a circadian rhythm disorder to get benefit from the light glasses. Often people use them just because it helps them wake up and feel more alert in the morning.
Thank you very much, Barton.